Right, to be respectful for those of you that have already come in, I'm going to go ahead and get started. As I mentioned just a few minutes ago, as people are joining, I have a lot of slides to go through, but what I prefer to do is to really see what you need to hear today. We only have an hour to discuss, and although this will be recorded, I don't want to go through a lot of information that may be meaningless to you. So we are going to spend a few minutes going through some basics, but I want to hear from you as well. So please make sure that you feel free to raise your hand. You can absolutely participate. I think all of you guys should be able to. Um, Let me just open up the chat here and make sure. Can everybody hear me? Can everybody see me okay? Is there any issues with you guys being able to go off mute? If so, let me know now. Let's work through any of those right now so that we can make sure that everybody can communicate as appropriate. Oh, good. Thank you. Yes, you can hear. Can anyone go off mute and speak? Is anybody able to do that?
Hello.
Hello.
Yay! Awesome. All right. Fantastic. So I want you guys to participate. Stop me. Ask questions as we go. This session is for you. I might not be able to see the chat at the same time if I miss something, but definitely put questions in if you would like as well. And let's just get started. So I'm going to share the screen. It is a presentation, but I'm going to be actually populating a little bit of information in there. So I'm just going to start out like this to begin with. And one of the first things that I want to do is I want to talk about what you guys are most concerned about. Usually resume issues fall into three big buckets, and then there's a variation of other things that tend to happen. And so what I want to find out from you is, what are your biggest concerns? Are there issues with formatting? Do you have concerns with being able to properly express your competencies, or perhaps you're concerned about your resume being scannable by artificial intelligence? I know the number one reason that most of you are probably here is because you feel like your resumes are going into a black hole. So we're going to automatically talk a little bit about that. But you guys tell me, and I'm going to take notes. What are your biggest concerns so that we can make sure that we address those in today's audience? Josh, I see that you went off of
Yeah,
mute. What have
sorry.
you got for me, dear?
Yes, I was. I think the main thing for me is just kind of standing out, I guess,
Mm,
with just the job market and the competitiveness as a CRA. I know sometimes you kind of want to like fit inside of the box, but
mm-hmm.
sometimes kind of being outside of it as well, as far as the norm and what resumes and CVs typically look like. So maybe something like that.
Yeah, I love it. It's a fine balance, isn't it? Is how do you make sure that you're standing out without doing something over the top that can make you look unprofessional, or perhaps keep your resume from being scanned? Because really, this topic in general can be covered in the competencies, making sure that your information is scannable by artificial intelligence, and even the formatting, because I think some folks want to stand out, and in order to do that, they think they've got to get really crazy with their graphics or their colors or that type of thing too. So
Mm.
yes, we'll definitely address that today. Thank you, Josh.
Hmm. Yeah.
Who else? Anybody else have anything in particular?
Hey,
Anybody?
Angela.
Hi,
Can you hear
Austin.
me? Hey. I just was curious. I mean, I want to talk more about the etiquette for changing up your resume, like if you get a job title change, and um, not to where it looks like someone looks at it and goes like, "Oh, what are they doing? Like, why do they change their job description? Like, it doesn't look fishy or anything like that." I don't know if that makes any sense.
Sure. So scription, are you saying title as well?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. If I don't cover this in the specific content, raise your hand as we get to some of these points, because I think this is a really good question, especially in light of, let's say, for example, perhaps you are a senior CRA, but you do some lead functions. So that
Hmm.
doesn't necessarily mean that your title changes to lead, but you have to be able to articulate the competency of having your lead experience and how that can translate if you want to apply to lead positions or that type of thing. Is that what you're talking about? Or are you talking about actually a shift during a position where you want to show I progressed from senior to lead to clinical trial manager or something like that?
Yeah, for me, I went from intern to an actual CRA within
Okay.
the company, but it was more of like my boss is trying to help me out and change the job title because he works with
Hmm.
me with trying to get me into the field, into the industry. So,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Awesome. Very good. Anybody else have anything in particular that you'd like for us to talk about? Those are great topics.
I was gonna add, Angela, the latter part of your discussion with Austin, just kind of portraying experience in other roles that maybe don't match your formal title. So like I've kind of been like a lead CRA on one project, and then also um, kind of like co-CTM during like a transition period,
Hmm.
and just had responsibilities as like a lead CRA and a CTM without that specific title. So I think portraying those qualities and experience without having those actual titles to stand out bold on the resumes is something that I would be interested in hearing.
Yeah, I love that. Because you're right, and I think this might have been what Austin was kind of talking about as well, is how do you make sure that's included so you're still focused on the job title or the position that you're applying for, but still showing the other transferable skills, especially if you're trying to represent that you have had a progressive opportunity or career or experience. And then let's say, for example, we have a senior CRA position today, and then tomorrow we launch a clinical trial manager position. And this is real time. We've had those individuals to where we've been working with them on the senior CRA position, and then they come to us and say, hey, look, I do have leadership experience. It wasn't on my resume. Let me add it. And so how do you do that again without looking fishy or like you're making something up? And I will tell you that some agencies are concerned with titles. We care less about titles and more about your true experience, but we still have to be able to articulate that in the resume, don't we? So, yes, we can certainly talk about that too. So,
Perfect. Thank you.
great. Great. All right. So let's kind of dive right in there. And then you guys, again, stop me as we go through if we need to. I think the one thing that we want to make sure that we do, and we're going to have a coaching class on this. It's actually going to be a whole big thing because I think this is really important. And I think this is where a lot of individuals fail is before you even put pen to paper on a resume, you really need to be thinking about your story in general. Because when you take a look at resume and the definition of a resume, and according to my best friend Google, it's supposed to just be a formal document that expresses just your basics. What are your work experiences, your skills, your educations, notable accomplishments, and all of that. And in the perfect world, it's just supposed to say, hey, look, you're suitable for this job. So there's a little bit of a match. And ideally, it's supposed to help you win an interview. But what do you guys think is missing from this definition? And maybe you don't know, which is absolutely fine and could be the reason why you're here. But if you look at this as a definition of a resume, what do you think could be working, could be missing? Feel free to plunk it in the chat too if you don't want to go off mute. Because I think a lot of times what people fail to realize, and if anybody has followed me on my podcast or anything like that, you realize that your resume has to tell a story. And so before you start writing your resume, you need to be clear about what it is that you're looking for. Are you looking for just an other contractor position that is perhaps in the same title that you've just had? Could it be that perhaps you're looking for maybe a bridge job because you just need something to supplement your time? Or maybe you have been looking for that clinical trial manager job for 6 months and now you just need a bridge job because, after all, most of us have mortgages to pay, those types of things. Are you looking for career advancement? Have you outlined your perfect position? Now, this takes a minute because I think what a lot of individuals fail to do is they say, I can do this work. Here's my experience. I'm going to apply for this job because I know I can do the job. But then whenever you look at their history, you're not really seeing a story. You're not seeing a progression. And quite honestly, when we start talking about what differentiates you and what makes you stand out, it's the progression, it's the story. When I look at a resume, I want to read it like I'm reading a novel. And okay, so you started out as an intern and then you progressed to a CRA and then you went into senior or a lead and then you moved into clinical trial management. It's this nice, really clear progression. And what you should do before you even start writing a resume is say, what is the story that I want to tell? What is my perfect position? Outline it. And we go through some really deep details and steps that we can do to kind of help you do that. It's on our blog as well, but being able to articulate what your perfect position is important, because then you can start tailoring your resume to help say, this is why, this is where I'm going, this is what I want to accomplish. And in order for me to get there, then you can start fleshing out, okay, well, if I want to be a leader, even though today maybe I'm a senior CRA, if ultimately I want to be in a leadership role, I know that I need to make sure that my resume has all of the leadership competencies that I've experienced or that I have skills and qualifications in. So if you've identified what that perfect dream job is, then you can back the information into your resume to show that you're working towards that, or perhaps you already have the skills and competencies to be able to get you there. It's a really important first step. The other aspect of it too is your perfect company. I think a lot of people really fail to look at what their perfect company is. Do you want to work for a large CRO because you're at the point in your career where having that diversity and experience base is going to help you become more competitive? Work with a really large CRO, 3, 4, 5 years, you could become a consultant and be highly, highly competitive to do that. Or perhaps you prefer to do study startup, or you want to work in small startups or whatever. Spend some time outlining the perfect company. What is the perfect company's culture? What does the management system look like? What type of communications? What is it that you want to get out of it, as well as what it is that you can contribute to it? This is important. You should always do this before you put pen to paper for a resume. Okay. And this is where you start crafting your career story, which is also, of course, critically important. And then the reason why I wanted to lead with that is because now we're going to start talking about artificial intelligence. And I think a lot of folks get really hung up on AI and how your resume is handled via artificial intelligence. Unfortunately, about 85% of resumes never are seen by human eyes. And I think that's egregious. And if you haven't looked for a job in a while, like you're a more senior individual, and perhaps you haven't had to do a job search in 10, 15, 20 years, this is completely different. And I will tell you that whenever you come through our portal, we look at every single resume. But to be very honest, when we get positions from our clients, the first thing we do is use our applicant tracking system to scan resumes that match keywords. So this is really important. Once you've identified your perfect position and your perfect company, and perhaps the specifics that you're looking for today. Like, I want another senior CRA job, but I'd like to have something that gives me diversity in terms of therapeutics or whatever it is that you outline that you want. Then you need to start thinking about how you're going to layer in your keywords on your resume. This is critical. When we're looking for, let's say, for example, a client says, I need an oncology CRA to handle MD Anderson. So the first thing we're going to do is, and if they give us the indications and the specifics of the oncology, is we're going to go and do that search in our applicant tracking system. The individuals that are close to MD Anderson that have all of those keywords are going to be the ones that we reach out to. Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to post the job. We will. But if you live in Boston or you don't have oncology or whatever, you're not going to come up in our search. So even though we have thousands of CRAs in our database, and a lot of those are already qualified and ready for us to put our brand on, you may not even come up in the search because of the keyword matches. Now, doesn't mean that you don't have a second residence in the MD Anderson area, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have oncology. What it means is that it didn't pick up in your resume. And so that's where the scanning comes really, it's extremely important. And it comes in handy whenever you're populating it into your resume. So there's a couple of things you can do is whenever you do your base resume, you want to make sure that you're adding in those readable tables that outline all of your different varied experiences. Don't forget about a technology table, or at least a bulleted list too. You've got Rave, you got metadata, you got all of these different things that you may have. Put them on there, because again, there might be some clients, and we've had those. I need a client that knows Viva Vault. I got a TMF transfer I've got to do from another system, and they got to know Viva Vault. Well, I'm going to do a search for resumes that have Viva Vault in it. It doesn't mean I'm not going to reach out to you. It just means I'm going to reach out to those folks first. And so that is really, really important. And there's a strategy that you can take in order to make sure that your resume gets found. First of all, you know the industry and you know the lingo in the industry. And so you want to make sure that you're listing those specific lingos. If you're a clinical trial manager or a CRA manager, consider using different varied terms, because some companies might call somebody a clinical trial manager where another company might call that role a project manager. Another company might call that role clinical operations manager. Where appropriate, it might make sense, using that example, to put all of those terms into your resume. I've performed the role of a clinical operations manager for the project, blah, 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 even though your title might say clinical trial manager. And this, I think, answers one of the other questions is, okay, I've done a lot of leadership tasks, but my title is a senior CRA. Okay, well, your title is your title. So your title is senior clinical research associate, but in one of your bullets state, I performed the role of a lead clinical research associate on project XYZ, and I supervised this number of people, blah, blah, blah. It's important that you have those, because whenever we're doing the searches with the keywords, not only do we care about the therapeutics and maybe even the indications, but we do search for things like bachelor's, lead CRA, clinical trial manager, those types of terms as well. So it helps you, just in a broad brush perspective, to go ahead and start populating your resumes with specific keywords that you know are going to be relevant to the job and the company type that you're looking to be able to find. Anybody have questions on this before we move on? Comments? And again, you guys can just jump right in if you want to. Okay, I'm just going to jump in, but you guys stop me if you want to. But here's the thing. I've heard these stories where individuals have spent all this time optimizing their resume with all these keywords, but you can over optimize. You can do what they call as keyword stuffing. And while the artificial intelligence systems might still cause your resume to come up, when human eyes actually do look at your resume, it needs to make sense and it needs to be genuine. And now we're back to your story. You know, now we're back to the point of, I served as a senior CRA for 5 years with company ABC. I was able to progress to a lot of leadership tasks because they trusted me. And so therefore I led project ABC. I had X, Y. You're telling a story, right? And I think what happens here is a lot of individuals feel that the resume is such a formal document that you don't have the leeway to tell a story, but you do. You've got the opportunity to be able to tell people, I did this, and this is the reason why I progressed. Or, by the way, this is the reason why I left. There's nothing wrong with putting those types of details into your resume, so that when human eyes see your resume, they hear your story and they start feeling connected to you, because this is, after all, a personal industry, isn't it? So you want to be able to show soft skills and hard skills. The competencies are easy. Any of you guys that have gone through our qualification process knows that we do a pre-qualification that asks you the how many years you've done it questions. Those are easy. 4 years of oncology, 3 years of cardiovascular, 2 years of this, 5 years of that, whatever it is. Those are easier to articulate, and you should put those on your resume and keep them updated. But the soft skills are what's going to get you to end game, especially in today's market. So, because the soft skills are what tells me not only how many years you've done the work, but how good you are at it. And the fact that you can take tangible information and apply it into a situation that sometimes can be a very difficult situation. And so I've given you a couple of examples, because the soft skills are going to be what makes or breaks your resume when human eyes actually get to it. And here's a really key example: strong leadership. I see this all the time. I have strong leadership skills. Okay, so is that just a buzzword that you put on your resume, or do you actually have strong leadership skills? Because, I mean, I've got 50 people I need to interview and I've only got one position. Who am I going to select? Well, I'm going to select the person to interview that basically tells me why he or she believes they have strong leadership skills. So it could be something like, I managed a team of 6, or I did this, or I managed this project. You want to use action verbs that speak to what you've done in a leadership capacity. And so things like, I delegated, I led, I managed, I created, I did whatever I needed to do. Make sure that these these are filtered throughout your resume. You can have it in the professional summary, you can have it down in the actual positions. I think it's important that you layer these in with the soft skills. So think about what soft skills CRAs absolutely need to have in order to be effective CRAs. Leadership's clearly one of them. Time management and organizational skills is another one. Negotiation skills is another one. Being able to foster effective relationships, critically important. So you can start coming up with these skills that you in the industry need to have to be effective in your role, and make sure that you're articulating how you've exhibited those in your past positions, because this is going to make you stand out from someone else who just says was responsible for PSVs, SIVs, IMVs, and COVs. Okay, well, sounds a lot better. I was responsible for helping to lead the team to complete 50 pre-qualification visits within a 2-week time period. I mentored X number of people. I did this, Y, what. This is how I accomplished the goal. That's a lot more powerful than saying I have experience doing PSVs while I worked at Icon. This is how you stand out whenever it comes to the specific details of your quantifying and qualifying your hard skills and your soft skills. And this is what makes you stand out. It's really, really important to be able to do this on your resume. Okay. So then the other thing that you want to do is whenever you've got some human eyes on your resume is, again, make sure you're sharing your personality and you're telling the story. It's so really, really important. It's not supposed to be a bland resume. 10, 15 years ago, absolutely. Today, no. You want them to go, wow, this is really cool. I love what they accomplished there, and I love where they're going here. You want them to be able to see that in your resume. But be concise. We get these resumes all the time. They were a CRA for Covance and then Parexel and then PPD, and they use the same verbiage under all 3 headers. Why? Because they probably took a job description somewhere and then you've listed out, these are my tasks, right? Now, tasks are important, but you don't want to waste real estate on your resume. You worked at Covance. What kind of study did you work on? What did you help the team accomplish? Okay, we get it. You've done PSVs, SIVs, IMVs, and closeout visits. But what did you accomplish there? It was a unique situation. It was a different culture. What did you do at Parexel that was different at Covance? What did you do at PPD that was different than both of them? And by the way, if they're not all different, it's all the same, then maybe you don't want to use a typical resume format. Maybe you wanted to use a functional format to where you just state clinical research associate, and then you put the dates of PPD, Parexel, and Covance, and then under it, then you put the one statement of what you did for all 3 of them. But don't repeat the same information over and over and over again. You want to show that you're the devil's in the details, and here's the details of that specific position and what made it different, and what I loved about it and what I helped them to accomplish, because that's really key. But don't mislead. I think one thing that I see a lot is individuals will say on their professional summary, I'm this, I'm that, I'm the other. And then you go and you start looking at their experience. I was like, okay, well, they're saying they're a clinical research associate, but I don't see where they've monitored anything. We just saw this morning in the morning huddle where someone said they were a senior CRA and that they'd been a senior CRA for almost 2 decades. And of course, again, those of you that have gone through our pre-qualification process know we ask, how many SIVs have you done? How many PSSVs have you done? How many closeouts have you done? 10. Okay, so he's been a CRA for 2 decades, but he's telling me he's only performed 10 visits total across 2 decades. I mean, you could do the math, right? I mean, there's no way that's possible. So he's misleading. And so again, you want to make sure you're really crisp and clear, because you can't afford to mislead anyone about your credentials. It is what it is. If you're trying to get the senior CRA position, say it. Feel I'm ready to do it, and this is why, and explain it, rather than just rather than misleading and saying, okay, I was a lead CRA whenever your title was really a senior CRA. Say you were a senior CRA, but you did lead positions. Very, very important difference here. Okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit about style and formatting. And I think this one drives me a little bit crazy, because I think everyone gets so hung up on the traditional resume formatting that they forget that they have a little bit of leeway. And we touched on this just a minute ago, but you don't have to do the chronological resume. Most people do. And I know in this industry we call it curriculum vitae, and I get that. Technically, though, what you guys put together are not CVs, they're technically resumes by the letter of the law. And so doing a chronological one is pretty traditional, but you don't have to do it that way, especially if you've done a career shift. If you've done a career shift, like for example, let's say that you were doing something completely different, and then all of a sudden you've taken those transferable skills and then you come into the clinical research field, and then you've had progression here. You don't have to show the chronological steps for all of those. You can do a functional resume. A functional resume will also work really well if you've got gaps in your work history, if you've had a career change, if you're in the process of doing a career change. You can do more of a functional resume. And we, in our coaching sessions, we go into details about what that looks like and how you could put it together and all of that. You can also do a hybrid, to where perhaps your clinical research experience is more chronological, but then before that, maybe you were a high school teacher or you were a tutor or you did something like that. You could put that in a functional format. And so then that way you're not taking up space, pages and pages and pages of your tasks and your dates and your whatever. You're just articulating these were foundational experiences that I had before I entered into the clinical research field. So it's kind of a hybrid. But know that you've got a little bit of a leeway there with formatting. But every CV or resume within our industry today needs to be targeted. And this is where you would actually take a look at the job description, and you're going to pull out the tasks in the job descriptions that you have qualifications for, and those need to make it into your resume. And it needs to be tailored. Your resume needs to be tailored every single time you go to apply for a job. And you need to look at that job description and pull that in. And people groan whenever I tell them this, like, oh my God, it would take me forever. Well, here's the thing. You can send your resume out to 100 people and maybe get one or two phone calls back, but it's the same resume. You just broadcast it out. Or you can do 10 tailored ones and get 8 phone calls back. The statistics are different whenever you use a specifically tailored resume. It shows that you already know what the job description is. It shows that you already have the qualifications for the job. And so it matches better. Not only will you pop up with artificial intelligence, because you'll be aligning with a lot of the keywords that are likely there because they're coming from the job description, but the human eyes that look at it are going to go, well, I need someone that can lead a team to get 50 PSVs done by the end of the week. He's already done that, right? So, oh, Austin, I see a hand. Yes, sir.
Hey, sorry, quick question just on this topic. So, companies like Icon or IQVIA, where when you apply for positions, they keep your CV on file. Well,
Yes.
if you're applying to different positions, does it look like when you want to tailor that CV for the individual positions, like let's say they're for different indications, like you're doing oncology or rare disease, and you want to tailor your CV to something like that? Would it look fishy if you're uploading multiple resumes? Or because I know they keep those on file as like, I know for Icon they leave it as like one file basically, like on your
Sure.
profile.
I think that's a wonderful question. I'll answer it in a two-pronged approach. The
Okay.
first thing that I would say is, and maybe I should ask, if you're applying, so let's say that Icon has 6 senior CRA positions available and they're all different therapeutics. You don't need to apply to all 6 of those,
Mhm.
because now there is a difference in the way that companies like Icon and Syneos, all of these other companies, handle contractors versus perms. But the individuals that are handling your CVs with the perms, they're going to look at your resume and see you're qualified as a senior CRA, and they're automatically going to say, yeah, he applied to the oncology position, but he also has cardiovascular and infectious disease and all this, and they're going to
I
consider
see.
you across the board. So you don't necessarily need to tailor it to that granularity with your indications. I would make sure that everything's covered. Here's what I
Mhm.
would do instead is I would add a cover page to that
Okay.
one CV. And then I would say in the cover page, I see where Icon has 5 or 6 different positions that I would qualify for. I'm applying to this one because I'm most qualified for the oncology, but I also have blah, 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 blah. And I would love to be considered for all. They'll automatically do it. The
Okay.
the the individuals that work for these companies, especially for permanent hires, are held accountable for closing requisitions. Unfortunately, they're not held accountable as to whether or not you stick in the job, but they're held accountable to close the
Yeah.
position. So
Mm.
if you apply for a position and they think you might be qualified for something else, they're going to consider you for that. They're incentivized to do that.
That makes
Okay.
sense.
Same thing with third party recruiters like us. I only get paid if you get placed. I mean, money doesn't fall out of the sky, right? I mean, I only get paid if you get placed. So if you apply for a position and perhaps let's say that you applied to a CTM job and I'm like, falls a little bit short, but wow, look at this guy. I could totally place him in a lead or a senior, whatever. It behooves me to do that for you because it's the only way that I make money is if I place you somewhere. And so realize, and I know it's hard right now because the market is kind of tough and everybody feels like their stuff's going into a black hole. But the people on the other side of the fence, they're incentivized to place you. So they're going to consider you for other options. And if you're worried that they're not, write a cover letter. Now, if you're applying to both a senior CRA position and a CTM position, I would write a cover letter for that too. I would probably still do 2 applications for that because it might go to different groups. Managers, there might be like a recruiting team for leadership versus a recruiting team for non-leaders. But I would still write a cover letter and say, hey, look, I am falling bump my head. I did apply to 3 different positions, but this is the why I did it. And this is why I feel like I'm qualified for all. Don't let the recruiters use their imagination. It's never
Okay.
going to end well for you.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
want us to get
Exactly. Yes.
creative, right?
No.
So cover letters are going to be your best friend there.
All
Okay.
right. Thank you.
That's a great question. Yeah. Thanks for stopping me. So, okay. Now let's talk a little bit about the other things you can do to make your resume unique. Because I do see this a lot, and I have to tell you, it drives me just a little bit on the crazy side, is people use these gimmicks. They'll put a personal picture on their resume. Now, some countries require personal pictures. Some countries require you to list whether or not you're married or you have kids or, whatever. Obviously, North America does not. I don't need a picture of you on your resume. Unless you're applying to be a model, don't do stuff like that. Same thing with Zippy Graphics, bright colors. I just recently hired an administrative assistant for our team, and she was adorable. If it hadn't been for the fact that her resume actually told a story, I would have probably passed her up because her resume had flowers on it and it was pink and it had little pink graphics and everything. And I was like, I would have never ever considered that for a CRA position. But for an administrative assistant, she told a great story. It was very well put together in terms of the content. I considered it. I'm glad I did because she's fabulous. But keep that in mind. You want to make sure that you're careful with the zippy graphics and with all of that. Some people put these things together in these tables and they look really great when you're looking at them, but they don't scan. Canva is trying to sell you, hey, you build your resume on Canva, and then what does Canva do? Well, it downloads it in a PNG or JPEG. Those aren't scannable, you guys. You can make it as beautiful as you want to, but it's a picture. It's not scannable. You're not going to compete because artificial intelligence is going to pick up nothing, zero. So that means you got a 15% chance of being seen. So you want to make sure that you're being very concise. I'm a Word girl. I would tell you to write up your resume in Word, convert it to PDF before you send it over. So, and I'll show you why here in a minute. But you want to make sure that you're just being very clear and concise. You're telling your story, you're showing your personality, but don't try to be clever. Don't try to be funny. Make sure that you're as modest as you can be while still selling yourself. I know it's a little bit of a fine balance, but we talked about before, don't exaggerate. If your title wasn't a lead, don't put lead on there. Just talk about what you did that was in leadership realm. And I'll tell you this too, nobody cares that you like walking on the beach or reading books. Don't list your hobbies on there. Now, what I would tell you is if your hobby aligns with your career, absolutely. So let's say that you volunteer at a clinic or you do something like that, you would consider that maybe a hobby and volunteer work. Now that I would add, but make sure, I mean, if it's not relevant, again, back in the day, that used to be a thing. It's not a thing now. It's just a waste of real estate on your resume. So you don't really want to do that. And don't share highly personal information. I've seen resumes come through to where they've said, I really need this job. I'm recently divorced. And if I don't get a job in the next week, I'm going to lose my kids. I don't know what you want me to do with that. So, I mean, do you have 3 years experience as a clinical research associate? Do you have this, that, or the other? Because at the end of the day, we have to bridge to business. Do I care that you're recently divorced and you're about to lose your kids? Absolutely. Can I help you or will I help you? It's not my job to help you with your divorce. It's my job to get you a job. And so let's talk about what your qualifications are. So just kind of keep these things in mind whenever you're trying to stand out, because there is a little bit of a balance between the two. Okay. Um, Now, everyone's going to roll their eyeballs, but I'm going to tell you, run spell check. Do you know that even though we tell people to do spell check every day, multiple times a day, that still 64% of resumes get rejected because of spelling issues? 64%. Now, some of it might not be your fault, but there are some things that you can do to check. First of all, capital letters. Did you guys know that in Word, and I think Google does this as well, if you put something in all caps, it will not do a spell check on it. So I just had an executive that applied for a senior director job that we were working, and he said his date was such and such to present, and he misspelled the word present because it was all capitals, nothing flagged. I've seen where people misspell Parkcell. They misspell experience. So it don't use all capitals unless it's a trademark thing. So if I say I work for IBM, which I did, obviously I'm going to have IBM in all capitals because that's their trademark. Otherwise, I would steer clear of capitals because you could be making spelling errors and never see it. The other thing I would tell you everyone to do with their resume is plunk it into Google Docs. Take the word, copy it, plunk it into Google Docs. Google Docs has a different algorithm for spell and grammar checks than Word does. And so if Word doesn't catch it, something like Google Doc will. If you don't have Grammarly as, because I actually have it as an app on my Chrome, and it tells me all the time that I'm stupid. But that's important if you're creating a resume. There's other ones, SlickWrite, ProWriting Aid. They're excellent. They're free. You can download them as little apps and they can tell you if there's a spelling or grammar issue. They can also give you other recommendations on how to phrase things so that perhaps it's not passive, it's an assertive writing style. Highly recommend that you do this because again, 64%, you guys, 64% make spelling errors. The other thing too is a lot of people can misspell a word without misspelling the word. They type manger instead of manager. So, so you're going to want to make sure you get other people's eyes on your resumes. And what I tell people to do is read your resume backwards. Because if you're reading it from top to bottom, you're reading on your cover letter specifically too, you're reading it from top to bottom, you're reading it like you're reading a novel, right? So you know what it's going to say. And so that's what you're seeing. But if you read it from the bottom sentence to the top, you're not reading it for content or context anymore. You're actually able to look at the line more methodically and be able to tell if something doesn't sound right, or if you use like ensure instead of ensure, or effect instead of effect, or that type of thing as well. Grammarly will help pick some of this up too, as well as some of these others, but make sure that you're paying attention to those types of things, because spelling, I've seen it to where 77% of managers, and this is a statistic that my friend Google will tell you, 77% of managers will automatically reject a resume because of a spelling error. And if you don't even see that it's in there because it's an all cap issue or it's a verbiage issue, then it's kind of silly. So just take the extra step to make sure that you're clean on those things. The other thing is formatting issues that you may not be aware of. I I can't read paragraphs whenever I'm looking at a resume, and I don't know if I've got a learning issue or whatever, but if I look at someone's resume and it looks like this one over here to the left, where it's just a lot of words, I have a really difficult time being able to comprehend what that person's telling me that they've done. Now, they've got the keywords in there, popped up in artificial intelligence. I know this resume's got oncology in there somewhere, but am I going to be able to find it quickly and easily? No. This is the same resume in bullets. It's a lot easier to read. So make sure if you've got like a list of accomplishments or tasks or those types of things, if it's a list, put it in bullets. It's going to be a lot easier for people to be able to read it. And there's a lot of research that backs that too, because I've seen research that says that recruiters will only spend about 7 seconds on your resume before they decide to put it in a pile or continue to read it. 7 seconds. This resume over here on the left, I am so glad that my recruiters are a lot more thorough than me, because I would have probably never read that resume. seriously. And it's not because I'm lazy or that I don't mean this person goodwill. It's just that I've got thousands of resumes to look at. That's a lot to digest. But the bullets, easy. Okay, they understand GCP. They have done qualification. They help put together investigational sites. You see it. There's like a thought process in each bullet, so you're able to very quickly tell what this person has done and accomplished. So this is a really important one. The other thing that I would tell you to do is white space. Really, really, really important for white space. Again, human eyes need a break, and they need to be able to see that that the thoughts are separated. Now, if it's a bulleted list, obviously you don't need white space in between each bullet. But if it's, spaces in between specifics like education or certifications, or maybe you got a list of your projects or things like that, don't underestimate the value of white space, because it will help lead the eye and it'll keep them engaged. Because again, the one on the left is really hard to look at, but the one on the right, it's the same resume. It's just now it's got the white space and the bullets added. And so you can get a little clearer idea as to what the concepts are and the thought process is behind the actual resume and what this person is trying to tell me about himself. Okay. Um, This was a resume that we received from a clinical trial manager whenever we were recruiting the clinical trial management position. This is his resume. Now, here's my question. Do you think this person knows how to use bullets? I mean, it's kind of a hypothetical because obviously he doesn't. Here's my other question. Do you think he can write a report? How about build a monitoring plan? Draft SOPs? It's clinical trial manager. This is egregious. You guys, if you don't know how to use bullets, if you really suffer with tables, get help. Pay a resume writer to do it for you. Don't pay a resume writer to write your story. But if this is what your bullets look like, you need to get someone to help you clear this up. And in this case, you can even see where some of his content was a different color font, which means to me that he was probably copying, pasting from different job descriptions of different positions that he's held. And so, but again, the devil's in the details, right? Clinical research professionals are supposed to be detail oriented. You've got to express that detail in your resume. Make sure your bullets are aligned. Make sure your fonts are the same. Make sure the color of the fonts are the same. Make sure that the formatting that you use for one position is the same formatting that you use in the other. Again, I know that you guys are thinking, oh, well, we know this. You would not believe the number of resumes that we receive that look like this. And it's hard to overlook because as a professional, and especially since the number one deliverable that all CRAs have is your monitoring reports, you got to be able to show that you know how to handle Word. And this to me shows that the individual can't. So just make sure that you're real consistent with this type of thing. Okay, now let's just talk about a couple of other and miscellaneous things, and then I'll open it up to questions. I put this on my LinkedIn profile when I saw it. This was an individual's resume. When you looked at her Word resume, it looked great. But she'd put it in all these tables. Now, what you guys need to understand is that most of us as recruiters use applicant tracking systems or customer relationship management systems, and there's a whole host of them out there. But most of them have a viewer capability. So even if you send your resume over in Word, there's a couple of things that can happen. First of all, you can't guarantee that everybody's using Outlook or Word or Excel or whatever. And if they are using Microsoft Word, you can't guarantee that you understand what version they're using. They could be using the viewer online. They could be using 365. They could be using an old downrev version. You don't know. You have no idea. And you don't know what viewer they're going to be using, because if like this view actually came from our applicant tracking system. This is what it looks like when I viewed her resume on the applicant tracking system. I can't view her resume on my applicant tracking system. I've got to download her Word version and then look at it from there. So once you get your resume the way you like it, convert it to PDF. Now, be prepared to send over a Word version when they ask for it. And they will, we do. Because if we're going to represent you, and those of you that are on this call that we have represented before, you know we're going to put it on our letterhead. So it's got to be in Word in order for us to do that. And we're going to do our own standard formatting and all that. But if you send it over as PDF, then it doesn't matter what version of Word someone's using. Maybe they're using Apple instead. Maybe they're using a different word processing in general. It's PDF. It's going to look the same. You're not going to have to worry about it looking like this. And this is really important. Okay. The other thing too, I would tell you is be wary of copy paste issues. The formatting example that I showed you, I am sure that most of those issues were copy and paste because he was probably copy and pasting. Oh, I want to, yes, I've done that. Let me put this over here and this type of thing. Copy and paste issues will be the death of you. Know how to strip the formatting and reformat it so it all looks the same. Make sure too that your LinkedIn profile, your resume, and any other experiences listed across your digital footprint align. Because if your LinkedIn tells a different story than your resume does, now your LinkedIn doesn't have to match, your LinkedIn doesn't necessarily have to be a resume. So it doesn't have to be exact, but it should never conflict. And we see that a lot where the LinkedIn will say one thing, then their end date's a different date, and the resume is something completely different. We've seen it where, yes, he's a forklift driver. And then we get his resume saying he's got 20 years experience in the clinical research industry. Those are going to throw flags really quickly. And it may not even be that it's fraudulent. It might be something completely different, but you definitely want to spend some time looking across all the platforms where your information is located and make sure everything aligns. Um, Current resumes need to match the history on previous ones. I think this aligns a little bit with some of the questions to where, hey, is it going to throw flags if I send multiple resumes in? Well, no, not necessarily, as long as there's no conflict, because we get this a lot too. If you send me a resume today, we're going to compare it to the other resumes that we have on file for you. And what we're looking for is shifts in start and end dates and shifts in employment, Yes, Austin.
Yeah, sorry, another question, I guess, or topic, but I completely agree with that. I'm glad to hear that you say that because for me, I'm continually trying to update my CV to look better, to still match, but to uh, be competitive still when it comes to
Sure.
being like caught in the black hole, I guess. So I don't get caught basically. So
Yeah.
I guess I just didn't want to raise any red flags of like, why are you changing your CV so much, even though it's the same uh, content or added content. It's just I don't know the other side of it, the like recruiting side or like what raises red flags. So I'm
I
glad to hear
agree.
that it doesn't
Yeah.
really do that.
It doesn't, as long as it doesn't conflict with what you've said before.
No, of course,
Yeah.
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 All
So, I
right,
mean,
cool.
it would be different if you were like a clinical research associate, but at the academic level to where you were patient facing, which is technically a clinical research coordinator according to our language. And
Mhm.
then all of a sudden you're not patient facing anymore, but you're now monitoring the site. So that would be a flag. But I
Right.
think, updating your resume to reflect a better way to represent your soft skills, or maybe you did do leadership, but you didn't have it before and now you want to add it. I don't see anything wrong with that at all.
Perfect. Okay.
But be careful because whenever and I'm old, right? So I mean, I've been around for a really long time. It would be really hard for me to remember what I did pre-IBM and what those dates were. And I think, a lot of times what happens is if you've been around for a minute, sometimes you do forget, especially if you've had a lot of contracts. And if
Hmm.
you have a company like ours that says, hey, look, I need your month and years on your resume, I would rather you come back to me and say, it's been 20 years, I don't remember them. Therefore,
Right.
I don't want to guess. Because it should never be a guessing game. I would rather you tell me that than to just make crap up. And then Beth, guess what? I got a resume from 20 years ago and it doesn't match now. Now we're having a different discussion. So that would be the only caveat that I would have for that is just, be careful whenever you're updating your resume. And sometimes the copy and paste, the end dates get messed up or whatever. We do see typos on start and end dates. And we usually ask about them if it's only one or two.
Hmm.
If it doesn't match an old resume, but if it's like a whole trend, we're probably going to be out because again, there's so much fraudulence in this industry. It's like, okay, well, how many chances do we want to give somebody? But what you're describing, I think, is absolutely fine. So,
Perfect. Thank you so
perfect
much.
question. Yeah, absolutely. So, and like we've talked about, your title is your title, your start and end dates are your start and end dates. If you got a gap, there's a couple of things you can do. Explain the gap or just leave it there. I would explain it. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to say, I only worked for Parkcell for 3 months because it was the most horrific experience that I've ever had. You don't necessarily have to say that. Most of the time, gaps are only really becoming flags whenever they're longer than 6 months or a year. And in those situations, I would probably explain it. Got laid off by Par Excel, was looking for my perfect job. Be positive. right? Been looking for my perfect job and just haven't found something that fits yet. La la la. Took a career break to take care of my aging parents. Decided to go back to school. Feel free to list them there, but don't stretch start and end dates. And if you leave it blank, just realize that you're now allowing me to use my imagination. If it's only one break, it's not going to be a big deal. But if it's a whole bunch of them, it starts adding up pretty quickly. And again, our coaching class actually will help you go through and figure out how to articulate it. I saw a guy on LinkedIn the other day and he's like, I've applied for 1,700 positions and now people are starting to ask me, well, I've been out of work for 18 months. And it's because I've applied to 1,700 positions. Nobody's given me a chance to interview. What do I tell them? And of course, everybody's jumping on the whole, well, tell them that, you're getting ready to lose your house. I'm like, no, 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 no. You want to make sure you're spinning it positively, because the breaks and the gaps, you've got to be able to be honest with it, but have the right thing to say, the honest thing to say, but in a way that shows you're a problem solver and that you're looking at this positively rather than being a victim or complaining or that type of thing. Because people want to hire problem solvers. They don't want to hire people that are, kind of playing on the victim side. And again, I'm not trying to be hard whenever I'm saying that, because I get it. You got a mortgage payment to make and it might be getting pretty tight out there, but you've still got to learn how to kind of market yourself from a perspective. So, for example, are you going to go and buy a toothpaste at the store that says could cause sensitivity to your, such and such and such and such? Or are you going to cause one that says we have solved the problem of sensitivity? You're going to do, it's a marketing thing. You've got to make sure you're marketing yourself here. And gaps are one of the biggest things that bite people in the backside, is not being able to spin them the right way. And then the last thing is the degree. We see a lot of people who say they got a bachelor's when they didn't. They didn't finish their degree. The school isn't accredited. The school is a diploma mill. I mean, there's a whole bunch of it around this. But just make sure that you're not representing a completion date if you didn't get a degree. You can look at my profile and see I didn't finish my master's. I show that I went to school, but I didn't finish. So I show the program, and I think I even put my GPA, but I don't show a completion. And I think that's the right way to show it. It's just to make sure you're being very transparent there. Okay. And I think we kind of talked about this. We can talk about it a little bit more during the Q&A, but should you hire someone to write your resume? I'm pretty opinionated about that. Let me kind of pause here, and I'm going to, just so that, because this is recorded, but you guys, just so you've got all of our contact information, all of my contact information, make sure if you and I are not connected on LinkedIn, feel free, shoot me a message, say that you were in the webinar, can we connect, etc. The other thing I'm going to do as well is, because we are launching the coaching program, and this isn't necessarily a pitch for the coaching program, but if you do want to do the coaching program, you're going to get a discount because you were part of the webinar. And here's what I would say about that right now. And if any of you guys have ever paid someone to do a resume, to write your resume, right now it's costing on average, from what I can tell, between $100 and $400 for to pay someone to write your resume. And as you can see, someone else is not going to be able to tell your story. Now, someone else is going to be able to help you with the formatting and the bullets and the tables, and, maybe even give you a keyword strategy if they're experienced with SEO and all of that. But they're not going to be able to tell your story. They don't know what your ambitions are. They don't know really why you left these different places. They don't know. And so I think it's an error. I think it's an error to hire a resume writer to write your story. I think you should only bring someone in to write your resume if you struggle with bullets and formatting and that type of thing. But that is my opinion, not yours. I will tell you that the coaching class that I'm going to be doing, which is an intensive class on writing your resume, to where we'll be reviewing and we'll be going through, is going to be less than $200. So it'll be less expensive to take the class and learn how to do it yourself, so you can tailor it for every job than it would be to actually pay a resume writer to do it. And if you don't want to do the coaching, that's absolutely fine too. We're putting stuff out all the time. You can always, we're going to have a community that you can join to where is this for free, to where you can ask questions as well. But these things are really important. Your resume is your calling card. If you do it right, you don't need to send out hundreds of applications. You really don't. It can be a lot more tailored and a lot more specific. So let me pause. I know we answered questions throughout the session, but what questions can I answer for you? Did I answer all of them already that were already asked? If not, we can dig into them now. So the floor is yours. Anybody? All right. Well, I will go ahead and wrap it up. I really appreciate you guys being here today. Thank you so very much for attending. I would love to have any feedback. If there's other sessions that you would like to do, I'm going to be doing a very similar interview session as well. And also, we're going to be spending some time on social media and building a LinkedIn presence and how to do that effectively and attract people to your profiles and, you know, all of that type of thing as well. So there's going to be more. So stay tuned. But if there's nothing else, I'll let you go. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Angela.
Bye.
Bye-bye.